This works. I think I'm live now. I can't see comments here. Welcome. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm actually waiting for the stream to catch up. I'm watching the YouTube page right now. Hopefully it's going because all I see is my face alone in a Google Meet meeting. But if you're here to talk about public speaking, there's now I see. I gotta mute myself. There we go. Let's go. There we go. All right. So sorry, there's a delay. There's like a 10 seconds delay. Oh, so, Alon, you're here. You jumped right in. I thought it would ask me if you wanted to join.
Depends on if I'm on the calendar invite or if you want.
Oh, how do I change this layouts? Let's see. Because I think that's gonna like, I don't know. We're trying this out. We're trying out Google Meet live streaming. I do like that I can see live transcription. That's really cool. But I don't.
And it looks like we can see how many people are watching. That's interesting too.
Oh, weird. So on the okay, I see. I'm watching the live video right now. In Google Meet, I see your big window and me in the little window.
Yeah.
On the live stream, whenever you're talking, the window switches to you. Okay, so I'm figuring this out because StreamYard is very different, and I wanted to try Google Meet once.
No worries. I think so. Anyways, hey folks that are watching, nice to have. I don't know if you're. We're just getting set up, but say hi in the chat, and we're happy to. We'll get started in just a little bit.
Yeah, I was also hoping that YouTube chats would come back somehow into Google Meet so we could see them there. It does not appear to.
It does not. It is
another reason that we might want to stick with StreamYard, but I wanted to try this anyway. What happens? I have reactions. Let me see. Does this show up anywhere?
No.
I think it just shows up in my video. All right. I'm going to see what happens when I share my screen because I have the page up. Here we go. I have no idea what this is going to look like on a live stream. But again, I'm counting out. And I think this is more than 10 seconds delayed. So this is really fun.
Yeah. Yep.
But I mean, it's nice that it's like no settings, no configuration, no knobs to twiddle, like it should just work. But okay, now I see it. My screen share, I'm on the side. I don't see you now. Weird.
Yeah. Sorry, folks. So we're just getting this is our first time doing this YouTube stream, so I think we're getting familiar as folks are joining in. But the goal was to, help answer if you've never given a talk at SCaLE before, or maybe you haven't given a talk at SCaLE before, or anywhere, was to sort of give you some was to sort of live help you think through your ideas and see how we can help you noodle on what you might want to present on.
By doing that, I see Angela and Techno Babu in the chats. I put a link in the chat as like if people want to join on the video, like you would be live if you want to come and ask your questions. Love to have you on. We can talk about whatever it is, brainstorm, things like that you have. If not, you can also leave comments and we can go through them there in the chat.
Yeah. And I see some folks in the chat that have been past speakers. If you want to talk about your experience doing that, happy to help.
I did invite one other person who said they're going to come, who was a first-time speaker this year and a first-time attendee this year. So it's great to have just that, like, what was it like to go through the whole process of you came to a conference for the very first time and you spoke at the conference for the very first time. So we should hopefully get some of that. But yeah, a lot of this, we wanted to get feedback from people in chat if anyone wants to jump on. And, if you have an idea, if you want to talk about something, if you want to just know what it's like, happy to talk about those things. RoboDom says they've been referring colleagues who would be potential speakers. That's great. That's what we want to hear. And that's like, I mean, it's a community event. It spreads not by marketing, but by word of mouth. And I think that actually makes SCaLE really unique in many of those ways, because the people that are speaking are not professional speakers. And I think that's great. Like there's so many conferences now are the professional speakers, the people, professionals being like your company pays you to go travel and talk. You're in DevRel, or you do something on marketing, or you do something adjacent to that where it's like, yeah, no, it's in the budget for you to go do those things. And SCaLE isn't that necessarily. I think that's great.
Yeah, we do get some quite a few professional speakers as well, but I think
Yep.
what makes the way SCaLE started was it was a bunch of us that were just mostly college kids, honestly, starting that wanted a conference of our own about the things that we were excited about, and so what is it? 23 years later, none of us. 20 years, 3 years later, those of us that were going to graduate college have graduated college. Those of us that weren't, haven't. And so,
It's not happening now.
but we've expanded our interests, and we've gotten a new generation of folks. And so the idea is just to keep that that hometown feel. And so it means that we blend together commercial with educational, with nonprofit and community stuff all together. So next to the Red Hat booth, you'll see the Debian booth, or the run by a bunch of volunteers, or I should probably pick an example that's not too Linux distros, but you get the gist. And so it's a lot of fun. All things open source and open source adjacent. So
I was talking to someone recently that I was saying you should come to SCaLE, and they mentioned they're like, I don't use Linux, I don't do Linux, and I was like, yeah, like it's not like it is difficult to brand things in a way that is generically this is a conference for anything open source, anything that's even in a lot of cases technology based that you're interested in, to come share what you're learning.
Yeah. So other topics that have been popular, and around here. I mean, open source, I think, and open platforms run on all kinds of things, right? Like there's containers on Windows, there's Kubernetes on on other platforms. So it doesn't all have to be Linux. But I think generally we have other things that are interesting as well. Like we have a whole security track, right? Security concepts are applicable to all platforms. Maybe how you implement them is different. But,
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Like DevOps, collaboration across silos has to happen in regardless of the tools you're using. So don't over-index on that. Or like our dev track talking about dev tools, like and dev workflows. Like that's you can write software for anything. So
And for anyone that doesn't know, if you want to look at the old schedule, I love that SCaLE does this, which not all conferences do that, where you just whatever version of the conference, you can just go type in 21 or 20 or 19 or whatever, and you can see all of the old speakers, all of the old presentations. Where's the schedule? There it is. So if you like go here, I can look at Saturday schedule for this year, and I can see literally as soon as it loads up what was talked about, who was there, what conference talks they were giving, and that just gives you like a great idea of like, oh, this is what the history of it looked like. Maybe I have something that's aligned with one of those things or similar to something else. I saw a question here about someone like Kyle. What's a good theme or what's been already talked about? It doesn't actually matter what's been talked about too much. Which
things change. I mean, things change from year to year, right? So like even if we had a great talk on secrets management with Vault, last year, maybe talk about Vault, there's probably like a whole new way of doing it this year. Maybe like if we look at the Kubernetes space, and Justin part of the crew that runs our cloud native track that focuses all about all these cloud native technologies like Kubernetes and service meshes and containers and all and the like that world is moving so fast. The way you ran Kubernetes last year is different than how you run it this year. So we want to hear about your last year of adventures, even if somebody told us about their previous years of adventures. So
right. And even just the way your experience and the way you deliver something might resonate with someone else better in the room. And you can't assume that because there's been 21 other SCaLEs that people have attended them or watched the videos, or that's not the case. Like people are there in 2024, 2025, and they want to hear what it's like today.
Yeah. And also, I mean, if you think about like bash, I don't know, let's pick something that's probably been around forever, like bash tips and tricks, or like advanced, whatever. Like bash has been around for longer than I've been Linuxing. Turns out there's a new generation of Linux users every year that don't know all of the SCaLE tips and tricks that you've come up with, and maybe that maybe that's more on the basic side. But like these are all folks that are coming in earlier in their career, and they still need to learn. We don't get to say like, well, and gatekeep it and say, well, the folks at SCaLE 5 learned all about bash. So you don't get to learn.
We did that. No more.
Yeah. But the idea is to just sort of share what's in the zeitgeist of around open tech and open platforms today. The things that are happening at SCaLE this year that are, sort of special and different. The Nix community, if you're part of that ecosystem, is running Planet Nix alongside SCaLE this year. That replaces what used to be NixCon North America. We've got the Cloud Native Days folks, as Justin mentioned, that used to be what we, used to be part of the Kubernetes Community Day, KCD programs. The OpenStack and sort of Open Infra community is running Open Infra Summit alongside SCaLE. So it's, the world has gotten quite broad.
And those previous days are a lot of times on Thursday and Fridays and special days. So if you look at like a Thursday schedule, Thursday and Friday, like during the week is kind of, I don't want to say it's like the business focused things. It's like the things that your company might pay you to come to the conference for, is a lot of workshops, and it's a lot of like, we pay for this software in a lot of cases. Postgres being one of, like, MySQL often has a track. And these are things that's like, oh yeah, during the week, you got to take time off work for that. Once you get to like Saturday and Sunday, there is a lot of those same tracks, but in my opinion, like, a lot of the talks get more fun, they get more independent, and people are like, I'm here to show up to talk about this thing I did in my basement over the last couple of years. And it's awesome. And this is why I think you should also learn about it. And there's also the next generation. Again, if you like, the only conference that I know of that has a track dedicated to kids, for kids, like kids giving the talks and kids attending the talks, is awesome, because it's a very family-friendly environment. I'm bringing my son next year. He actually spoke last year during the Kids Day, and I know a couple other people that are bringing kids as well. What's up, Casey?
Hi there. Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. We're still getting started here. I have already determined that I don't want to do live streams on Google Meet anymore.
So the one, just keep it, there's a whole conversation over on YouTube about what's going on, Casey, with folks, and unfortunately we have to have the YouTube video and sort of muted on the other side, otherwise you'll drive yourself crazy with the 30-second lag, but you'll at least see what they have to say. Yeah, we've got somebody in the chat, Nova, that spoke at SCaLE, started at SCaLE speaking when they were, I think 11 or 12 years old, and these days much far into their career and doing lots of interesting work in the VR world. And so it's been a great place for the next generation of tech of sort of tech leaders to get their start. So even if you don't have something you want to talk about, maybe your kid's doing something fun with open source or computers or tech in general, this is a great way to give them public speaking experience, and to sort of get their feet wet in that.
Yeah, and
we've had,
my son's talk wasn't open source focused, right? It was how to run a YouTube channel. He was doing a YouTube channel for live streaming. He happened to be using Linux and OBS to do it, but it was not focused on that. And so it's not like a exclusive thing of like, well, if you're not talking about open source, or you're not doing something that I can, go download and try for free, then I don't want to hear about it. No, like, we want to hear things that people are doing and learning about and want to share about.
Yep.
Casey, now that you're here, maybe we do like a round of just introductions. Like we've been, Ilana and I have been talking for a little while. I'm Justin. I just help with some of the stuff. I'm not like I'm not like an important linchpin of SCaLE. I've been attending for I don't know how long. I think I first attended in 2008, 2009. So I wasn't there in the beginning. I was there when we were in the West End before the Hilton.
Yeah.
So it was somewhere around that time.
I mean, that's very early SCaLE days. I mean, honestly, I think SCaLE is all about our community of attendees that become organizers, which become attendees again. So it's everybody's important. And I don't know, Casey was running network cable for year one, and then just enjoyed SCaLE for many years afterwards. And then we conscripted him, much to his family's chagrin, into helping with the core organizing. So let's we're always looking for extra hands in the sort of bizarre sort of way of helping of sort of many hands make light work.
Which is also interesting. Like, if you want to learn some networking stuff, like you can come volunteer for SCaLE like the day before SCaLE and like help set up network, and you will learn a lot of stuff. Like the amount of networking that gets done is pretty amazing on like the volunteer SCaLE side. And if you want to learn how to run, you know, a call for papers, or you want to just help with like room proctoring and network setup and the venue setup and all that sort of stuff, like these are, I don't want to say non-technical, they're not necessarily like heavy programming tasks, but there's a lot of organization, and you still get like real world hands-on experience for running a conference with more than 1,000 people. I saw a comment that we should go over the a lot. What do you do for SCaLE, just so we can like semi wrap up introductions?
So Elon, one of the co-founders for SCaLE, and you know, like I said, I think I was a freshman in college or senior in high school when we started all this. So like that just goes to show like I had no idea what I was doing when we got started. And if you don't know what you're doing now and you want to help out, that's fine. You now have 23 years of people that have done conference planning to help you get over that. We just had to figure it out on our own. But yeah, so these days, you know, the conference chairman title, which honestly just means I herd cats and fill in the gaps where things need doing. You know, just been, you know, after 23 years, SCaLE's just become sort of a fantastic place for me to meet all the people doing interesting things in open source and open platforms, as well as to see, you know, 3,000 to 4,000 of my closest friends, you know, once a year now that I don't live in LA anymore. So, and so I guess that's the other piece I'll mention, is that while we all started living in LA, SCaLE's really become a global community with folks coming from all over the place, both in terms of planning the event as well as attending the event. Like one of our organizers lives in Germany now. He comes out, you know, his annual SoCal visit is for SCaLE, and he helps organize one of the tracks, and it's great. I live in, you know, I'm usually on the East Coast in New York. You know, Casey's up in the, you know, I'll let him share if he wants to share where he's at. But you get the gist. Like we don't have to be, you don't have to be within walking distance of the Pasadena Convention Center to be on the planning team. There's so much you can do as part of the group from anywhere in the world you want to be.
And by way of introduction, I'll say, yeah. So I'm Casey, and I run the program committee. Have for a couple of years now. So the CFP process and the selection process for all the tracks, with a big committee of folks that help with that. As they sort of alluded to, I started out as getting dragged to SCaLE by a friend and helping run network cable, and being, you know, in college and not knowing what was up with any of this, to you know, now running a committee. Also was a, you know, person in college who didn't have a career yet, and now I've been working at a big tech company for many years. So we've come a long way. Two quick things I will put out there. So two of my favorite things that nowadays happen consistently at SCaLE that are awesome is, at some point I will be standing in a booth and there will be some kid who's like, I'm trying to get started in this stuff, for some definition of this stuff. What do I do? And I can be like, here's some stuff to get you started, and like can see a little bit of, you know, where many of us started from. And that's awesome when it happens. Seeing all of the friends, but also the thing that's been really cool, having done this for a long time now, is seeing people who were the kids asking questions like that coming back and being like, I started a company, let me come talk about it and be a SCaLE speaker. And it's freaking awesome. So yeah, but I'll stop there, and yeah, we can move on to getting your talks in.
Yeah, that is really cool. So I know, yeah, someone in the comments mentioned we should just like talk about the CFP process, right? Like, it's kind of why we're here. Again, if people have questions about things they're thinking about, you can leave a chat, or I have the link in there in chat if you want to jump on screen. For the CFP, the call for presenters, you go here, you need to sign up for an account. I think you log in somewhere, CFP login tool, to actually log in, create an account, because you do need to have an account so we can reach you if we accept your talk, or if it's not accepted for whatever reason. It does give you a lot of these like tracks, things that we are looking for, that generally fall into, if we look at the schedule, one of these like buckets of topics. So we have all these things at the top here that it'll fall into. If you are outside of that, that's still okay. Like there might be something that you're saying that we're like, oh, that does align with something else. Or there's a general, right? There's I want to do something not part of any one of those specific things, but I have an idea. I have something that I really want to share. So you find something like that. There's the co-located events, as Alon was talking about. DevOps Days LA is actually really big on, I think it's only Friday, or is it Thursday too?
Friday.
Just Friday. But there's a lot of people that come out just for DevOps Days, and then they don't come to the rest of SCaLE, and that's totally fine. Like, it's a co-located event. They like to do that. It's been going on for a long time. There's open source career day of like, hey, how do I do stuff as like actual job with open source, open info, like you mentioned, workshops. Here's the proposal. All right. All the way down here. So you log in as your user and you submit your proposal. I'm not logged in, so it's access denied. I need to log in. I haven't proposed anything this year because I don't usually. Let me unlock my password manager and log in. Okay, so now this should work. There we go. So you do get a speaker profile that will look something like this, which is just your user page. And we do that. It collects what talks you've done in the past a little. I need to update that. I'm no longer at Amazon. But information about you. So it'll show up as like a speaker bio sort of thing. And then in this case, you're going to go through and you're going to fill out, like, is this a beginner topic? What category does it fall into? How are tags used? Are they like actively used anywhere in the process?
It's used later on for when people want to search for talks.
Right, filtering.
Yeah.
One thing I'll throw in about topic there, people ask about this a lot. You don't need to double submit to different things. Like, pick the one you think is best, but also we will move things around as we need to. We may reach out to you if we think it's in the wrong place, but just put the one that you think is probably the best fit, and then like it may get moved around.
Yeah. And we might even see your talk and say, we love the topic, but we don't like the angle. You can, could you help us shift it around or whatever it might be, right? And so, but best bet is to submit, even if you're not 100% sure of it. And we'll either give you feedback or leave notes with questions in the sections for reviewers, and we want the best content for the community and for SCaLE, and so we'll work with you to get awesome topics included.
Somebody asked about this, so let me mention the one where that's not true is workshops. Also upscale. So upscale is lightning talks. So that's like 15 minutes, 5 minutes or less, something like that. And the normal talk tracks, which is almost everything on this list, are 45 minutes to an hour presentation style topics, except workshops. Workshops are a 2 to 3 hour block on Thursday or Friday where you plan to do a hands-on workshop where people will come in and bring their laptops and do something hands-on. That requires a lot more preparation, and we will work with you individually to make sure that you're prepared for that. You probably need somebody to help you facilitate that, versus a talk where it's probably just one person talking, maybe two people talking, and you need slides.
And Kyle was asking in chat, like, what are the best practices there? And it really depends on what your workshop is about. I've helped guide a few workshops now, and some of the best things are like, if you just get people started with like as much ready to go environment as possible. We've seen a lot of workshops come in and say like, okay, we'll go clone this repo. But people come to workshops and you don't know where they're coming from. A lot of times we have people that have never had a GitHub account. They don't know how to use some of the stuff, or they have a locked down corporate Windows device and all of the command examples that they can't copy and paste. And so being able to give someone a fully enclosed sort of environment that's portable, that's just like, here you go, we're going to get started from a known starting points, maybe like a GitHub or what are they called, the code spaces or something like that have worked pretty well. But just giving someone as much of the environment as possible. If you're like, we're going to code something or deploy something or test something, you got to get them up to speed pretty quickly. And then you have to be ready to slow down, because a lot of the workshops, even if it's a 3 hour block, people aren't going to all go at the same speed. And you have to be able to, we do have people we can help proctor the room and spend time with individuals if they are a little behind or something. But in general, you want to be able to make sure that you're flexible on like, this 3-step task, we're going to give 20 minutes for just in case.
I will say the number one thing you can do to not screw up your workshop, don't expect a high bandwidth network connection. While the SCaLE network is awesome and we work really hard at it, when 3,000 people show up and start using the Wi-Fi, and then also several workshops start, if all those workshops start with please download, have 30 people download a gigabyte of stuff to their laptop. That's not going to end well. And so, yeah, we will work with you to find a way to not have that be the first step of your workshop.
Last year we got rate limited, right? Our IP address got rate limited to GitHub. So there's all those things that you don't consider at home, and you have to consider when a lot of people are on a single network.
Yeah. So I guess
with the form, this is good.
Kyle was also asking about like how much coding is too much in a workshop, and I think that really depends, because if you have like, if you're doing a advanced audience workshop, hopefully people come with that expectation, but that's not always the case. So you need to be prepared of just like upfront letting people know, like, hey, I want you to do something here. As many templates and examples as you can provide, the better, to get people like up to a certain spot. But I know workshops are really about like learning the thing,
getting hands-on. Yeah,
and a lot of times you just have to do it.
And yeah, I mean, if you say how much coding is too much coding, right? Like if it's if the workshop is like learning Python or learning I don't know, building your first building your first AI application in whatever the language is, like you're gonna have to write code. That's the subject of the workshop. If it's how to set up and get familiar with Kubernetes, maybe it's a lot of configuration and deployment and YAML, and not as much about the about the code. Or if it's one of the career workshops, it's going to be all about how to interview and how to do people skill stuff, not necessarily code. So it really just depends on the subject matter.
And the more details you can provide about the workshop, the better we can help guide that, as like, hey, maybe this is too much, or maybe you want to pare this back because we can only fit it in a 1 hour block. And if we can say take your 5 goals and make it 1 for the workshop, then that might be a better fit, because also we can help with proctors and people that can help in the room. And if we only have 1 person that can help, it's maybe not going to go as far as having 3 people that can help. Autumn joined. There we go.
We have a guest, special guest.
Hello.
Hey.
We're apparently with Google Meet, when you join, we're automatically live streaming because I added you the invite. So thanks for joining. I asked Autumn to join because Autumn attended for the first time this year and also was a speaker this year. This year meaning 2024, when this happened in February, March, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so we were just going over the general like CFP process, and we'll finish this form real quick, just showing people, but then just asking you like, what was the experience as a first time speaker to prepare and do all these stuff after the form was submitted.
Oh, okay, sweet.
So yeah, but like to finish the form, we do ask for an abstract, a short abstract, and a long abstract. Do they show up different places in the sites? Is it always just using the short? Right? It does have a long piece.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is the short abstract gets used on printed materials. So like if you wrote don't give us your PhD thesis on Kubernetes, not to keep picking on Kubernetes, but that, if you have if you have more content or more background you want to share with us, that the longer version will go on the website, where we're not going to, where we don't have as much constraint on the amount of space you can use, and the shorter versions end up getting used in print or on digital schedules around the conference, where where we maybe have just like an inch or two of space on the page to fit your whole talk in. So,
and I just put it in the chat. This is I have been publishing all of my CFPs to all of my conferences for the past, I don't know how many years now. 2019, I guess, is when I started. So 5 years. So if they're accepted or rejected, I have been submitting them so people can see, because CFP, like the actual abstract, is kind of hard. And it's the thing that a lot of people get hung up on, is like, I don't know how to say the thing that I want in 2 or 3 sentences. And so I've been open sourcing them, so you can go to my website and see everything I'm submitting places. But this is an example of the SCaLE on-prem one that I put together for last year, and my long and short weren't that different. It wasn't like this huge, I needed to have multiple paragraphs or anything like that. Like you can have just like a little more information about the thing. You don't have to write the book, like Elon was saying.
Yeah, and it just depends on how much you want to have out there. For example, for a workshop, you might have all the prereqs for what they should download and what they should install as part of the longer description. But we probably don't need to have a bunch of like commands for like what to download in the
Yeah.
printed program, right? Like we're not even, like we're trying to keep things, keep things tight. So, yeah.
And then presentation is the next step. You don't have to submit this when you submit your talk. We assume you don't have a presentation ready before it gets accepted somewhere. So this is totally fine to like submit this afterwards. It makes it really nice if people come back to SCaLE, especially when we go and look at the history of events. If someone wants to find a presentation slide deck from a previous event, they can still, because we add that to the talks on the description. So if this talk here had a presentation uploaded, it'll be there. We also, so there's your presentation is a PDF, as well as the video of the recording. So this just makes it really easy for someone to go back and say, oh, this topic's interesting. I couldn't see the slides, or I want to keep the slides and share it with someone else, whatever. We try to put that stuff in there, but it's not necessarily required for when you're submitting your talk.
Yeah. In fact, if you're already submitting the slides this early on, I would guess that you've probably given this talk at a couple other conferences before. Which is not necessarily a problem, but we also like fresh content. So, if you might have a novel idea or a novel topic you've never presented before, don't feel like you have to have the presentation done by November 1st. We just want to know what you're thinking and sort of what you're working on and how you'll get there. So, but yeah, and as Justin mentioned, there's a link in the chat. I know we've got like a whole agenda in front of us, but there's a link in the chat if you all want to join and talk through what you're working on at work or in your hack projects, and we can definitely talk through like which of those we think we'd be excited to see and how we maybe would format it or help you get it submitted. So a lot of times what we work on day to day, we're like, oh, that's just what I do. I'm really boring, and then you start talking to people out in the world, and they're like, wait, you do that? I do that. I want to learn how you do it, or I've never done that before. Can you teach me how? And so what's our mundane day to day often is like this super inspirational, aspirational, like I wish I could be that, for somebody else. So yeah, come share what you're working on.
Is there a different process for the kid talks or for like college students or anything?
Similar format, similar way of submitting things. It's just we're looking for we have a group of folks that'll work with the kid presenters a little bit more hands-on on what they're doing, and then I think my default wanted to be like, oh, it doesn't have to be as advanced, but the reality is some of those kids run circles around the rest of us, and it's probably more advanced than what we're doing. So but the process ends up being about the same, and I think that's one of the other things that I think is a great experience if you're just getting started, is just like learning how to do all of this when you're 12 or 13 or 14 is huge for your career later on when you're in the professional world, and they're like, you already just know how to get accepted at conferences, you already know how to submit presentations, you already know how to get in front of a room full of people and give a presentation. I know it helped me in my career, so I'm glad I did it as a kid, and I hope to see folks do it here. We've seen, we talked about Nova, who's in the chat, talking about about their experience. I think we had one of our speakers, many years ago, ended up being invited to the White House based on like the various talks they'd given at tech conferences over the years, including the first one they gave at SCaLE. They ended up at MSNBC, and a bunch of other, sort of news shows. Like this is, I don't mean to make it seem daunting. Like I don't want to scare folks off, but it's also a gateway to a whole bunch of other things career-wise if you want to get started early.
One thing I would say for the youth track is typically they can be shorter, right? We typically expect people to have a good 40-45 minutes of content in the main tracks. In the kids track, if they're doing something that's 15 minutes, that's reasonable. It's not reasonable, for like sixth graders to speak for close to an hour about a topic necessarily, and that's cool.
My son wants to submit, even though he probably could talk for 50 minutes about Minecraft or something. But yeah. I was like, I need you to talk
Learning
to your
to edit is a great skill to develop.
Yeah. I told him he needs to talk to his uncle Justin about like writing talks, because he keeps talking about Raspberry Pi projects, and there's so many things.
Yeah. The other thing is also just remember the audience in the room that you're talking to, whether you're an adult or a kid. Remember who you're catering the message to and the content for. So
Yeah.
if you're presenting to a bunch of, fourth, fifth, sixth graders, they probably don't have, they're probably not ready to sit in a seat for 6 hours for your hands-on workshop, right? Whereas
unless they're playing Minecraft, and then they'll sit all day.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I don't know. Also, there was a kid talking about Linux in the hallway at SCaLE last year, and I swear that kid knows more about Linux than I will ever know. It's amazing.
Happens all the time. I keep getting pulled aside. I was at KubeCon last year and got pulled aside in the audience by like in the hall by somebody. I'm like, do you remember me? And I was like, I don't think so. I'm sorry. And they're like, well, I gave a talk at SCaLE when I was 12. And I was like, you're 30 now. You don't look the same. I'm really sorry. But
That's
wow.
so cool though that it's so welcoming that like 12-year-olds get to like talk about that stuff.
I was like, but I got to hear all about his career and how how open source impacted it and the community impacted it. And so it's it's not an isolated experience. It happens all the time. So I definitely encourage, if you have a sharp kid in your life, whether it's yours or somebody else's, or some teachers that are working with sharp kids, I encourage you to get them out to SCaLE. But why don't we maybe shift gears, Justin, and talk? I guess we've kind of gone through the process of submitting. Do we want to talk about the review? I mean, I guess review-wise, once you get things submitted, we take a couple weeks to look through the deluge of amazing content that you all put in there, and a bunch of our different committees that are experts in those topics will try to craft a program that teaches that teaches the latest and greatest about that area. And then we try to get out early to mid-December, try to get answers out to everybody so you can start working on your amazing content.
And then that also applies to like helping you craft it. If we shift it to different tracks, or we say, hey, could you talk about this piece of it more? Those are all things that we'll go back and forth with speakers. Like, we really like this. We want you to come. We think it's a good idea, but we have an identical talk about a similar thing, or we have a different, person that's doing something similar. It's like, can we just change how you're approaching this? Because we read it. Like, I read so many CFPs that I'm like, I want you to do a whole talk about this one sentence you just like threw away in the proposal. And if we can dive more into that, I would love to attend.
Yeah. And you touched on it, but in the first week of December is our intention to get back to everyone, and we will send you a response, whether we accept your talk or decline your talk. We also sometimes ask people, would you be willing to be a backup? Like, we didn't have a place to fit it into the schedule, but if you're willing to have it ready, people do cancel sometimes. And so we may come to you later and say, can you do this after all? But we want to respond to you no matter what, so that it should be in early December. Let's see. And also, please check your spam filter. So we do communicate with everybody via email. For whatever reason, I've had a bunch of people say my email coming from SoCalLinuxExpo.org ends up in a spam folder. I'm sorry about that. Send me headers if that happens to you, and I will try to figure out why. But if you haven't heard from us, that might be why.
Backups are extremely important. For KCD last year, we ran through all of our backups, and we invited everyone that we sent please come as a backup. We used everyone. So don't think this is never going to happen. We still want you to come. We still think it's a great topic. It just so happens that sometimes we fill up on a specific topic or track or something.
All right, any of you
pandemic years
this year?
I was going to say pandemic years were also years when we people get sick, can't make it, what have you. We ended up going through a lot of the backups as well. So definitely consider. But I'm sorry, with the lag, I spoke over you. I apologize.
Are you guys submitting any talks this year? Casey's talk was my favorite talk last year.
I don't have a talk that I'm probably going to submit this year. I think in all of the years, in the 20-some-odd years of SCaLE, I've only ever been on panels. I've never submitted my own talks. That maybe I should change that, but I don't know. We always end up running around, so dealing with so much logistics that it's the idea of giving a talk at your own conference is always daunting. But I don't know, Casey, you've done 2 now. You ready to make it a 3rd?
Not this year. I want to do something security related, but it's not going to happen this year, I think.
I might. I don't know. Maybe I'll do an upscale talk or something. I've had some funny stories from this year, but not. I don't know if I can fit in the full one. But do we want to? I mean, Autumn, you got to speak last year for the first time. Do you want to maybe And Justin, that was kind of what you were hoping to focus on.
Yeah, like I invited on, to come on to like say what was the experience like what you got obviously accepted, and then you had to prepare for something. You had a few months to do that. Were there any surprises along the way? This wasn't your first conference talk, was it?
Wasn't my first conference talk, but it was my first of this size in person, because I think a lot of my conference talks were virtual because I got started during COVID. So it's my first, I think, with that many people in one room, maybe.
Standing in front of people is different than a screen.
It's very different. But I think I was really lucky for the first time to be at SCaLE, because everybody was really like welcoming, and it was like a lot of really cool people. And I was really glad that it was like, I think the third day or second day. So I got to meet a lot of people that were like welcoming faces in the audience, you know? And Justin, what'd you say?
I'd say if you're new to SCaLE, one of the things that's very unique about SCaLE is because of the low barrier to entry. It's you don't need a company willing to buy you $1,000 ticket to a conference, and so we get people that work at big tech companies, and we get 12-year-old kids, and we get enthusiasts that have only ever done this at their house. Like, we get a cross section you don't see other places, which I think is part of the reason why it's very welcoming. Like, there's going to be somebody in the audience like you, no matter who you are.
That was really cool. Like, being a mom, a lot of people would be like, you can't be a mom, be an engineer, or like you have to like almost kind of hide the part of being a mom. But at SCaLE, it was like moms that were founders of startups walking around with their babies, and like they were in like talks, and nobody was upset about the baby being there or the baby being fussy. Like, people were so nice, and it was like such a drastic change from what you normally see, like people, like I feel like people can bring their whole self to SCaLE and be like appreciated for that. Also, Justin sat in the front row of my talk with the rubber chicken, so
Yeah, so you might have your friends. What you're saying is the audience will be friendly, but your closest friends might be trolling you.
And
but
I know someone asked in chat too, like, what was like favorite talks that we've had from SCaLE? And like, I've had a few that like I've enjoyed the content from, and I've enjoyed the speaker. But one of my most memorable talks was someone that literally, like, it was their first time speaking, and they showed up, and it was like, I think they got a Sunday afternoon, which is often a difficult time for a first time speaker. And they sent a picture on Twitter, and they're like, my talk is empty. And I replied, I'm like, what room are you in? I ran there so fast, and it was fantastic. Every one of the talks that I love are the ones that end up in like a pull request, that I'm learning something and I'm contributing back. And that topic was like, I was debating that one versus another one. And I'm like, oh, this other one, I was fine. Like, I wanted to go to the other talk. And so I went and I showed up, and I was like, 2 months later, or whatever, like I was involved in the project. Like, I sent pull requests to like expand it and figure out how to use it in certain cases. And that was a great talk. I still remember that talk to today. It's just like, it wasn't a big speaker. It wasn't like a big thing. It was a topic I was interested in. It was open source, and I ended up being able to give back into the project. And that was why the talk was so good.
I think conferences are usually like super expensive and very unaccessible, and they're about like a lot of people from companies being sent to these conferences to sell people or to sell something. And SCaLE, like the people are, to me, what stood out the most. Like, it's a really welcoming community, but just people that are working on all kind of really cool things, and nobody's like elitist about it. Like, they're very willing to like explain their project to you, or just have a coffee or have lunch with you. It was a really great experience just meeting different people.
Don't be shy. Those of you that are in the audience and they're watching the feed, feel free to I don't know, maybe just so we can post the link again in case it's gotten lost in the chat. But
yeah. I think I don't know if the link is showing up. I think YouTube chat might be hiding it, which is a bummer if that's the case. The Google Meet ID, if you go to meet.google.com, is that. So if you want to jump up and have questions and actually ask specific questions about your talk or proposal or idea, feel free. I think I'll get a notification. So. And we also, like, on the committee side, we do try to keep the focus of the talks very community focused, right? Like, we have a lot of people that submit a lot of talks that are sales pitches in disguise. And that is something that we totally understand. Conferences get a lot of sales pitches, and especially a lot of vendor conferences. People are there to be sold to. People attend conferences for professional reasons, and they want to buy products, and they want to understand how to solve their problems. at SCaLE, because that ticket price is low, because we're trying to keep it community focused, we do try to not have direct sales pitches in most of the talks. My first time.
I was just gonna say, like, what we want to focus on is learning, not on buying. So if that's not to say if you work at a vendor you can't give a talk. It's just don't. Yeah, it's just if we wanted to see an ad, we'd come by your booth and talk about it there. But in the session, talk about the capabilities and the things that your tool could be used for, without necessarily pitching the tool.
Yeah, talking in especially like what you learned about the tool, how it's being applied. I often say, like, for people that have submitted a proposal in the past, I'm like, hey, can you have a customer come talk about this instead of you? Right? If you work at the company, is there someone that that uses the tools? Like I went and proposed talks while I was working at Disney using Datadog, and I was like, hey, like we're using Datadog for this product. Can I go talk about Datadog? Because like Datadog would love it. I'm just a customer. I'm not actually trying, like, I don't care if you buy it or not. I'm just telling you this problem that's solved for me. And so that's like, those are things that are great for the audience to hear too, because I'm like, actually, we did evaluate a bunch of other stuff and Datadog was expensive. Here's why we thought it was good and why we ended up going with it.
I think that was one really cool part about the talks at SCaLE, is it kind of was like, it wasn't a ton of like BS fancy stuff. Like it was very straightforward, not straightforward, but like use cases and actual like learnings that you can take away from something. Like, and it wasn't just a bunch of fluff, because sometimes I feel like things get so theoretical or so like, we're this fancy thing and let me like sell you stuff, that products all kind of meld into each other. And this was more of like the actual, like, this is how you use something, this is how you take distributed systems, and this is what I learned actually doing the hard things. And I think that it just makes for really great learning and community and being able to ask questions and how you got to that. And I also really enjoyed talking to the people that were giving the talks afterwards.
Mm-hmm. I do think that SCaLE is one of the few places that an AI talk is actually useful, because it's someone that's like, actually like, here's how I used AI to do a thing that was interesting or fun or different, and not come by my AI product. And I was like, that was an interesting, like, just twist on how we're trying to get people that are building something and then sharing what they're building versus person building to sell.
Like, as someone who's worked on distributed systems and like these like complex issues, but when you're still like, even when you're working on it, but you're new to working on it, sometimes the talks that people have about it, you're just trying to get from that like 300 level to the 500 level can be, I guess, like just difficult, and you're wanting to learn how other people do these things and not just how you do it at your job, like in trying to get like an overall big picture. And seeing other people do it and really talking about like, this didn't work for me and this didn't work for me. Like Casey's talked about distributed systems, but it wasn't like a theoretical thing. It was like, this is what I did actually, and this is the problems I ran into it, and then this came out of it because of that. And a lot of times people don't break down a topic like distributed systems in that way, and I think it makes it really hard to be new in that type of a field, because it's one of those daunting things that just seems very like scary. And when someone says like, hey, this is what I went through and it didn't work the first time we were doing it, and then we went and tried this, I feel like it is it's more welcoming to like new people trying to figure out how to get into like infrastructure, distributed systems, like these things that generally like you don't get taught in college, and you have to learn that, and to do it at scale is scary the first time, so I think it's really cool to learn those complex issues from people that are actually solving those problems.
And also fascinating just from the attendees of how many people have the same problem as you. And like, we're trying to solve it a different way. Like I got a job at Disney Animation by meeting someone at SCaLE. And I met them at SCaLE because it was the first year the iPhone came out. Was it 2007, 2008? Something like that. And like they were at, I was doing a bunch of stuff with smartphones, and they showed up at a Linux conference and they had an iPhone. I'm like, how do you like it? Like, what are you doing with it? And like, we were just chatting, and then I asked what they were working on, and they're like, oh, we have this whole Puppet infrastructure. We're doing this stuff. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm doing the same stuff. I'm at this university. Where do you work? He's like, I work at Disney Animation. I'm like, what? Like, I'm working at like this little private place over here that like, I didn't know that you do the same stuff with the same technologies that I have. And I literally met them at the conference every year for 4 years. And it was always just like hey, how's it going, Steve? Like what's new? Like I haven't seen you for a year. Like what are you working on? This is great. And it's really cool just like seeing that repeat like long-term investment. And then at the 4th year that he was like, hey, are you looking for a job? We have an opening. I'm like, actually, yes, I am. Like, let's talk about it. And those sorts of like long-term benefits of just being in the community, spending time in the hallway track and meeting new people at booths or whatever is awesome. Like Alon was saying earlier, like just seeing people grow up through the process of like, I was giving talks when I was a kid and now I'm at starting a company.
Also, the soda machine was really cool.
The shell dispenser was awesome. Yes. Looks like Nova joined. Thanks for jumping up.
All right, y'all, I'm going to drop, but thank you so much for
Thanks,
inviting me.
Thanks, Autumn. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Pasadena, hopefully.
Me too.
I know Autumn already submitted 1 talk, and I'm encouraging her. You did the second one. Awesome. Cool. So
I'm bringing my like kids and my little brother who's going to school for college for engineering, and like all of my friends. Like we're just rolling like 20 people deep. I'm so excited. Also, hi Casey. Okay, bye.
Hello,
Nope.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yay! Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm going to ask a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So basically, I've done in recent years, I've done less sort of directly programming based talks, right? And I was wondering, because this is like the least programming based talk before, and there's not really a lot of, how to put this. There's not a lot of talks, it seems, on the design of things. And so I was wondering though, if my whole talk idea, which is that what's it called? Oh, I didn't prepare. Yeah, so I was wondering if my idea for a talk about designing for new mediums like augmented and virtual reality and such, it's tangentially FOSS related, especially because FOSS is an important part about how you actually design for that using FOSS tools. But admittedly, it's kind of far away from what the usual talks at SCaLE are. So I was wondering if that would be a potentially good idea to submit.
I'll jump in with my just initial impressions of it. I would love to see from like a UI design perspective, like the progression of how things have already come from like desktop apps to web apps to mobile apps, right? Like there's like different design paradigms. Like that has happened already in our history, with my history of using technology that I'm familiar with, and I can tie that directly to like, oh yeah, like frameworks changed, but like a lot of the things kind of stayed the same. Like I had a button, I had a like some text field, whatever. Like those sorts of things changed.
Definitely
like,
not the case with XR.
Yeah, but like how like some of that stuff doesn't carry over, right? Like some of that is just like completely a different paradigm. So like how would I do that in AR or VR? I'd also be really interested to hear like, are there open source projects or hardware to see how some of that stuff works? Like if I don't have a Quest, or I don't have the Apple VR thing, like I don't have those devices. Vision Pro, that's what it's called. But I am super interested, like the Meta, like what are the big nerd glasses now? It's not a product.
Orion.
Like, Orion, right? Like it was a project that was like, this is really cool technology. And that is super fascinating how you would apply, if you're building an open source thing and you want it to work there, what did you have to consider? Like, I think that stuff's really fascinating.
I don't. If you get me going down that road, I'm just half the talk is going to be a rant about how literally the entirety of the XR industry and the major players are self-sabotaging by basically locking down the APIs before there's anything worth locking down. But I'll try to avoid that, because I'm sure. I mean, people say that they are okay with the rants, but it's probably not the best idea to be doing.
I think rants are great when they're shared, right? When they're shared pain of like like Corey gave a whole talk about Kubernetes last year, and it was a packed room of a lot of other people that agreed with him. I was in the front row and I was like, yeah, no, everything he said is just like stuff we've been dealing with in Kubernetes for the last 8 years or whatever. And like none of this is new. When you're coming from like a new field, like if you want to rant about AR and VR, I'm not familiar with it at all. So I don't know any of the constraints or restrictions on API. So I wouldn't necessarily relate to your rant.
I would explain the whole thing, obviously, but I'm not doing that anyway. I'd rather boost the positive things instead of just trying to boost the negative things, you know. So.
Rants are fun if they're, or I would say rants are good if they're educational and constructive. Like there has to be like an underlying message of like, here's how we get better, without just poking me in the eye for not being as good as what you want me to be. And so, and when it teaches something, but like, yeah, it's not just a soapbox to like talk about the tech you hate. So,
yeah, of course. Although, okay, what do you think, by the way, about the talk idea I had?
I apologize. I was off dealing with a persnickety pet that was making a mess. So I defer to Justin and Casey. I'm sorry.
Okay,
What I was going to throw in is
it.
just a general thing about sort of UI, UX, and design type stuff, which is I think you get a set of people who are interested in that and would like to see it represented in general more, whether it's AR, VR, or otherwise. And if you have something compelling to appeal to those folks, that'll be great because it's underrepresented. And then you have a whole lot of people that, like myself, I spend my whole life trying to avoid all of that. I write back-end software and I don't want to deal with a UX ever, but the reality is that I ought to actually learn something about it, whether I like it or not. And so there's an opportunity to be like, hey, this may not be what you mostly do, but you better know some stuff about it. And like that's a great thing to learn in a talk. It's, you know, just enough to get by from an expert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's SCaLE tends to be, you know, I don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush, but we tend to be more back-end folks in general or systems folks in general than sort of web, you know, than front-end or UX folks. Which means we all are really bad at, many of us are really bad at making good, you know, UX experiences. And so it's probably a good cross-pollination thing to help, you know, to help teach them either about how to get started with front-end technologies or how to build the right UX so that so that things are better. And you have to look no further than the current, you know, than some of the current SCaLE website, which has been fantastic. And I've said this for, you know, 24 years now, but like,
it's good enough for what it does.
But there's plenty of UX that we could improve on if we had, you know, if we had the right web development team working on it, and we're building that out now. And if you love Drupal or you love web technologies and you're in the audience, please come join the web design list, because we have lots of things we'd love to do.
If you shift around a couple of links, your UX will be a bit better, but.
And that actually would be an interesting like twist on what you're proposing here. It's like, how would you take something existing and redesign it for AR VR? Like how would the SCaLE website look in AR VR? How would you improve it? Like that sort of stuff would, I think, be really fascinating. As
you wouldn't really.
Right. And like there are
way
that like, this doesn't make sense. Just start over.
No, it's more like, you know, I'm not going to go into a whole lecture, but if you're trying to make something work for AR and VR though, you have to not redesign it. You have to reinterpret it entirely. Like you have to start from a deeper point in the process before, you know, because if you just redesign it, it's going to look like a derpy knockoff. It's not going to really, anyway. But yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting few slides. Yeah. Okay. But overall though, yeah, increasing cross-pollination and all. All right, sounds good. I will get started on that abstract and all.
Yeah, they're due. I don't even think we mentioned this whole time. They're due next week, November 1st. So you have a week to kind of prepare what you want to, write down some thoughts on like what you would want to teach someone, what the rant or goals or shared concern would look like for people attending the talk, and then you know, submit the form.
Also, keep in mind, You can, if you ever want to. You can edit the abstracts later in order to refine them more for print. But obviously, you want your first drafts that you submit to actually be something that lets the presenters and the Call for Papers team, know what this is all about. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because it's not a permanent thing. Like you do have this submission, but it's not something like you can't obviously change the whole thing. But we want to work with people if we think it's a good idea and we want them to come to give that proposal. We could fine tune it and make sure it's ready before it goes up on the website live or goes to print.
All right. Well, I guess I'll step down if we need room for other people.
We haven't had anyone request yet, but yeah, thanks so much for jumping up. I don't see any other questions. That maybe missed something too. If there's anyone else that.
I mean, I could stick around as well if you want. I don't know.
How long have you been attending, SCaLE?
Oh, I've been attending since I was 10. That was actually ever since until recently. The SCaLE years lined up with my age. So I joined when I was 10. Then I spoke when I was 11, and so that was 10x and 11x. And I've been speaking most years since. But yeah.
Cool.
Do you have any advice for people that are submitting? Like if you've given you've given 10 talks at least? Or
Not
so?
sure. I mean, there were a few years I took off, but yeah, around 10.
What advice would you give?
Goodness. That's actually really difficult because it's sort of it's been intuition for me for a while. Oh, jeez. I guess I guess maybe okay. So my process is sort of I sort of go from a core idea to a vague outline of slides and such, and then I go backwards and summarize to make the abstract. Instead of basically just trying to expand on the idea for the abstract and then, make the slides from the abstract. I find that personally works better for me. And you don't have to like diagram out all the slides before you do the abstract, but just having a general larger flow of how your whole talk is going to go in mind, really helps to make the abstract work, especially because the abstract is not only meant for the actual Call for Papers team, it's also something that is going to be printed, which means that it's what people are going to read when they determine if they want to see your talk or not. So if you want to have, lots of attendees at your talk, you really got to hook them with that.
A little bit of clickbait helps sometimes. Just making it a little more interesting than a paragraph sent like title of like, this is the exact same thing that I want you to know about.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite talk title from 2 years ago was Year of the Linux Headset, because it's a meme with Year of the Linux Desktop. Actually, funnily enough though, that name, somebody basically ripped off, some YouTuber ripped off the contents of my talk and paraphrased it for a YouTube video. Sorry. Oh, look, I'm famous. I've been plagiarized. I'm sorry.
I saw someone ask if you should do a live demo in your talk. I think I love doing live demos. I actually don't do slides typically. I just do demo, but that is very much up to someone if they want to do it that way.
Did you do this on purpose? Okay, so if you're going to do a live demo, you better have a backup. For the past 2 talks, I have tried to do live demos and they fail spectacularly. We're talking the video players crashed is how spectacularly they failed. So you've got to have a backup and you've got to have tested it, and do not update anything from your last test to when your talk is. But other than that, yes, Yes, the live demos are always fun, and it allows you to basically react to the audience, though, and they can ask questions and say, oh, can you show me this? And you can actually just do it right in front of them, but you have to be prepared.
And as like Alon was saying earlier, like the network is robust, but when there's thousands of people connecting to a website or trying to do something on GitHub, like it becomes a scaling problem that is out of our control. And so those sorts of things need to be considered too. It's like if you don't have an offline version of it, or if you don't have a way to do this without internet access, you may want to reconsider what you're showing.
Maybe it's a good time to add. Yeah, having a backup for your live demo is a great thing, but also remember the talks will be streamed to YouTube. We will send out some requirements to speakers about how you should present, and things like refresh rate matter a lot to making sure that we can stream your talk successfully and that the image is captured. I'm trying to think what other requirements there. We do offer some ability to test that. So if you are a speaker, you'll be able to come to the AV room or to one of the other rooms and test your setup and make sure. And that is something you should plan to do before you give your talk, so that you're not up there at the beginning of your time trying to get your laptop working. We have resources for that.
Anyway, you mentioned you might have network problems. Has there been a time when the network was completely down? Yes. It's not common, but it does happen sometimes.
Yeah,
and it's usually localized. So like normally the whole thing doesn't go down, but your conference room might. So
yeah, no, we'll try not to jinx it by saying that, but yeah, we tend to be pretty reliable. It's one of the things we're actually pretty well known for the amazing network experience. But things like in all IT, things happen.
Especially when you're scaling up, scaling up from 0 users to a few thousand in a day.
I think we've had a good record of not being down. We've typically had more specific problems, right? Where it's like we got blocked by GitHub due to rate limiting on one case, or there was something that was unique to like Google login that had to do with like IPv4 versus v6, because we do have a v6 network. Weird stuff happens.
Yeah, like if you're gonna do a workshop or something like that, though, buy a bulk bag of USB sticks and just pass them out with all the files you need on them.
I'm sure your security team at work will love that. But yes,
plug in this USB drive.
But no, I think this is where just like having a sense of, if you need people to download stuff, let's put it in the talk description, now, so people start downloading it now, or the week before the show, not the day of. So. Yeah.
Also be aware though that well, if you're at a hotel, you might have enough SCaLE attendees at your hotel to where you can actually bog down their Wi-Fi. So be careful about that too. So backup and then another backup and then another backup.
Yeah, and then try not to touch it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, demos fail, but also the more you practice them, the more you try them, the more the more robust they get. And so, demoing is an art in and of itself.
And the more robust you get, right? Because you're familiar, like, oh, I've seen this error before. It was the thing I did that one time. And I still think that like some of the best live demos are the ones that partially fail and people recover from, because they're like, oh, let me fix this real fast and show you why this failed, how it failed, and how we're going to fix it right now.
Because that's when you learn most, right? It's in the middle of an outage.
Even worse though, when you're demoing your own software and then a completely new error you've never seen before pops up. That one's terrible.
Yep.
I don't have anything else specific going over CFPs. If anyone else has questions, you can jump in the chats, or if you still want to come up and ask questions, feel free to. Between now and next week, the SCaLE Slack isn't public, right? Where should people ask for help if they want to get other feedback? Is that just social media? Is that on LinkedIn?
Yeah. I mean, you could at SoCal Linux Expo on your favorite social media. You could shoot an email to cfp@socallinuxexpo.org, and we'll get it to the right folks. It's probably the most likely way in which not to get missed, is email, just because there's a whole bunch of us watching it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, we keep talking about launching like a public chat Discord, like maybe a Discord or something. So maybe we'll. It's probably too late for the CFP this year, but at some point maybe we'll do something. So, but email's great for now.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Casey and Alon, for jumping on. Thank you, Nova, for coming up.
Actually, sorry, I just thought of something that
Yeah.
I might want to mention. So I'll just start sort of rapid firing, tips on how to do SCaLE talks, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because I figure, we talked a lot about the call for papers, but not what it's really like when you're actually up there and the preparation after call for papers, but before you actually present. So, well, okay. First thing is, though, do run-throughs, right? if you make a bunch of slides, though, and you don't necessarily have to have slides be the core medium, the actual way that you present is pretty flexible, as long as you're able to publish whatever it is, and you've also got the video for backup. But the video does take several months after the conference to actually show up on YouTube. So, but the point is, though, is that, what was it? Oh, yeah. So you want to make sure, though, that whatever amount of time you have is well practiced beforehand. Because if you don't practice well, you can go under or you can go over. And you don't want to do that. And sometimes I found, though, that like if you put a timer on the smartwatch or something like that, you can just quickly glance at it and know exactly how much time you have and do that while practicing. And you'll sort of get an understanding of, here is sort of the timing. When I'm at this point in the time, I should be on this topic approximately, and you can just keep adjusting that, And so that's why you want to go through run-throughs, and you want to do it with friends. Ideally, you get a fresh pair of friends or whoever in order to talk to each time for your run-throughs, because then they can give you unique feedback, even as you improve and all, So, and overall, though, you'll still have to adapt to the audience. Like, how do I put it? Depending on your time slot and depending on what room you're put in, you may have a really, really big ballroom, and you may have what looks like a few people until you look at the until you sort of look at the actual number of people, and you see, oh, it's actually a lot more than I was expecting. So don't get discouraged. Oh, no one has their hand up. Sorry.
That's good. That just made me think of, we didn't discuss, there are room proctors. And so when you are giving a talk, there should be somebody in the room there helping to sort of introduce you and run the room. And they also will give you warnings if you are running long and going up against the end of the time, they will hold up a little sign for you to say you have 10 minutes left or whatever, to give you a sense of things, although having your own watch and your own method is also great. They will also help proctor questions. And so typically we have mics that we pass around to take questions so that the audio makes it onto the live stream. And so you don't have to repeat people's questions. So that's another thing that you should expect there in the room.
Yeah, and the room proctors actually are the ones that basically announce your talk as sort of an intro. So
these are also all volunteers. That's another job that I started out when I was an early volunteer. They were like, sit in this room and introduce these people. And I had the fun experience of, introducing people who were, big names at tech companies who I had never heard of. Just sometimes interesting.
I mean, this is one of the favorite parts of working on SCaLE over the last 20 some odd years is that I frequently get to introduce like internet heroes of mine. Like, I got to introduce Vint Cerf, like one of the creators of TCP/IP and the internet as we know it. Like, where else would I get a chance to meet him, shake his hand, and like, and get a chance to chat with him in front of a room full of people, or lots of other folks in that, in sort of that level of notoriety. So it's yeah, come to SCaLE, meet your heroes. And the nice thing about it is at a place like SCaLE, they're willing to chat with you, versus in some other, other places they give their talk and they immediately run off. So
yeah.
Like somebody asked about time for Q&A. So I think typically people shoot for 40 to 45 minutes of speaking, which leaves you up to 15 minutes for Q&A, but really you want some passing time. You don't want to run the full hour, and so hopefully you'll have 5 or 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. And then if people are super interested, sometimes that's where you take it to the hallway track, right? And then like take more questions in the hallway if people are really excited. That would be the ideal.
Yeah,
I
the hallway
personally
track
prefer the hallway. Like if I have a, I usually try to use as much talking time as possible. And if there's only 5 minutes left, I'm just going to say, thanks for coming to talk. It's over. Find me in the hallway. Cause that last like 5 minutes is, again, sometimes it's passing. Sometimes it's just hard to get anyone to raise a hand. And then sometimes it's hard to hear because some people are like, I need to get to my next talk, but someone else wants to ask a question. I'm like, let's not try to like do two things at once in the room. Just come up to the stage if you want to talk to me afterwards. And sometimes it takes all the pressure off of people. Some like holding the mic and talking in front of a room of, 20 or 30 people and being embarrassed about what their question is. I'm like, hey, it's fine. Like the talk is over. Just, I'm here as a person. We can just talk afterwards, whatever depth you want to go into, whatever thing you thought was a dumb question probably isn't a dumb question. And I just forgot to say it. And so, yeah, just come up to me and talk afterwards. So it really depends on you. But personally, like I don't like to do public Q&As in the room afterwards. I just try to go up to a certain point and they say, we're done. You can leave. If you have questions, come up. Which is also hard for YouTube recordings though. Because I know some people will watch the YouTube video and they're like, I want that question. But also I've been watching conference talks on YouTube for a decade and I almost always skip the Q&A when I watch it. So.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, sort of the actual process when you're in the talk is basically you get there 30 minutes ahead, and sometimes that bleeds into the last presenter's time, but you want to be ready. And then obviously when they when they finish and they're sort of packing up though, you can talk with them and sort of figure out how to set your own stuff up at the same time so that you're not interfering with them. And then you obviously plug your laptop into the projector. You double test all of the basics there, and then you get fitted for a mic. You do a mic check, and then just sit around though. Make sure you've gone to the bathroom and all, and then people will start flooding in, and sometimes people are late to the talks, and in my opinion, don't feel like you have to repeat the previous sections of your talk.
No.
Because if you do that, it'll take forever. But people will flood in. Some of them may have to leave, and I know how hard that feels, but believe me, they're most likely doing something else, and it's not because they hate your talk. So, and then just make sure to look at the audience though, or look above them. Doesn't really matter. And maybe respond if confused or not focused. You might want to amp up your stage presence a bit, and then once you're sort of done though, you might want to leave Q&A time or not, and and wait. By the way, wait before you answer the question, so that, or before the person asks the question, or tell them to hold off, so that the I forgot their name, the person can hand the microphone to them, you so that their voice is clear. So you can basically just say any questions, and then you can just point at somebody and say wait for the mic or something like that, and once they get the mic in their hand, go ahead.
I actually had a question. I wanted to put something out there while we have some people on the, watching the live stream. I'm curious if people have thoughts about what they would like from things we provide for speakers, like the speaker lounge and some of that stuff, because we have that, but it's often underutilized. Back in the day, I think the speaker lounge was a big deal to like let you get away from stuff and have network and have a place to work on stuff. But in today's world and cell phones and good laptops and good Wi-Fi and all of that, then like that's less necessary. And as an organizer, I've always wondered what people are looking for from those things that we could do better. So people don't have questions, maybe they have feedback too.
Well, I know for me though, whenever I'm in the speaker lounge, I feel a pretty deep pressure to like not say anything and to be as quiet as physically possible. And it's like, that's good and all, but a lot of the things you'll be doing in the speaker lounge include running through your talk. And so, being quiet, while you shouldn't obviously be shouting or anything, you kind of feel pressured not to really, to be much more quiet. And so that can sort of hamper the process. And I'm not really sure how to fix that problem, but it's sort of just a thing I noticed. Another thing is though, is I don't really see the speaker lounge talked about a lot. Like it's there, but it almost feels like it's some like hidden resource. In other words, like, I don't remember it being in any of the emails I got, and I don't remember it being something that was talked about outside of the lounge itself. It was sort of, if you knew about it, you dropped in, and if you didn't know about it, well, I didn't really.
Yeah, no, we email speakers about it, but the goal is, it's meant to be a quiet place for you to work on your talk rather than I don't know, a nightclub lounge or a bar that you're hanging out with and being rowdy in. So it's not like we have big, billboards everywhere. Come to the lounge. It's a fun place to be. It's like, come to the lounge, grab a cup of coffee, and get your talk ready so that you can give your talk later on in the day or dry run it or what have you. But cool. But yeah, thanks. Again, if anybody's in the audience and has questions for us, drop us a note by email or join the stream here. I'm happy to chat with you. If there's talks you want to see but aren't ready to give yourself, we also love that input as well. But yeah, I don't know, Justin, how I'm not sure where we are schedule wise, to be honest. I should.
I think there's a couple other questions in the chat we can probably do real quick.
Yeah, let's do it.
Linux laptop support for presenters. If you have HDMI output, or you have a dongle that works to get you to HDMI output, and you can have I don't know the refresh rate that's right in my head, but as long as you can set to that refresh rate, then you should be good. We don't really have other requirements besides that. So Linux should be fine if it works for you. You can have that thing that we all have where your X config is trashed at the wrong moment, but
we do love presenters using open source tech where they where they can, but again, SCaLE, the L in SCaLE is not meant to be exclusive. We're into all platforms, and so everything from BSD to Linux to to other proprietary systems, as long as it's about the openness on top of them sometimes. So don't feel like you have to install Linux if you haven't ever done it before, but we do love seeing Linux on the stage. So I don't know.
I think
as they say, don't get a parrot for us, but if you have a parrot, we like them.
I think every year I went.
Stallman joke went right over everybody's head. I'm sorry.
I don't know what that reference is from. You're fine.
No, Stallman has a speaker writer where he's like, if I could stay at your house and you have a parrot, I love parrots, but don't get a parrot for me.
I swear.
I will say that.
Sorry.
Anyways, sorry, Justin. Go ahead.
Well, I think I brought a Linux laptop pretty much every year, except for this year was the first time that I don't have a Linux laptop. I actually just have an iPad now. I was like, I've got to the point where I'm like, I only have an iPad for mobile stuff, and so that's what I used. But yeah, every year before I've always used a Linux laptop, and I've never had a problem. I did see someone that had what's the new i3 replacement. It's like a Wayland based i3 Hyperland was causing problems for someone on a presentation. So like, don't bring a unique new desktop environment maybe if you've never tried it before. Not saying Hyperland is bad. I'm just saying like they were new to it, using it, and like, how do I get my display over here? So yeah, so bring something you're familiar with.
Bring my I shouldn't bring my Linux XR headset though and use that as the as the presentation computer.
Yeah.
If you're
one thing
used
I
to
will
it,
say
sure.
that
I'm
one thing that
developing
tends to
it,
go
so
badly is sometimes we'll have somebody who really wants to do their slides and like they've made their own website that does slides, or they use some, you know, web-based slide thing, and that's totally fine as long as it displays like and goes to your output, it'll be fine. But we do want to post the slides. Like we want you to upload the slides in the tool later. You don't have to do that until, you know, the day of your talk or even after your talk, but so that people can see them online, we need it to be PDF. And so if you're displaying it in some format that doesn't easily make it so you can print things to a PDF that'll render, like you should think about that ahead of time, because it stinks if we can't put your slides up because you're like, well, I have this web page and like you can screenshot the whole thing and shove it in a PDF if you want. Like, I'm not going to do that.
People that write their own tmux frameworks for slides is always fun. We're just like, oh yeah, I did the whole thing in YAML with tmux and that's my presentation. I'm like, that's great for you. It's not a great way to share things.
That's awesome. Also,
please just give us a PDF.
Somebody did ask about specific advice for first-time speakers, which trying to think about if other folks have stuff to throw out. And Justin and Alon, you've seen a bunch of first-time speakers.
I actually, this year, and I think last year, I have a couple YouTube videos that I published on my YouTube channel for like first-time speakers. There's one that is something like 3 tips for public speaking, or yeah, 3 tips for in-person presentations is one. Again, you can go to my YouTube channel. And then I had another one that was about telling stories that were specifically when you're speaking a story to a bunch of people. It was mainly focused on public speaking, but not necessarily just that. So there's a how to tell better stories was the other one. So I have 2 YouTube videos that I've recorded over. I've given classes at various places I've worked. I've done different like workshops to help people public speak. Those were kind of like the things that I just kind of pulled out of let's make this into a consumable video. Honestly, I don't remember all of the tips and things that I said at the time because I was doing it more active then, but I do know one thing that was like often, especially at scale, was like using light themes actually just goes really far. On like everyone has a dark theme, their IDEs in dark mode, and then when you have a front projector with lights in the room that you don't control and you don't know what the glare is going to look like, sometimes it's just hard to see. And it's just like you can never make the text too big or the contrast too much. And so like having those 2 things as like the basics of like, can people see what you're doing is often a thing that people overlook. And in my dark office, the dark theme on my monitor that's backlit always looks amazing, and then I get to a presentation, I'm like, oh no, this is not my room anymore. So yeah, so less text on slides, bigger fonts, and high contrast is like the main thing if you're making slides. It's just like, and if you're doing a live demo or if you're showing whatever, like if your VS Code theme is all dark all the time, then people probably aren't going to be able to read it, and you're going to be like trying to highlight text to show them where to look. Those things are hard. And also even like on Mac OS, you can make the mouse bigger. If you are doing live demos, like do that up front. Like just like people can't see your little pointer from the back of the room, and if you have the big mouse pointer, then it's just like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about now because I can see it. Those sorts of things just go a long way. When you sit 15 feet back from your monitor and try to do something, like just pretend you're doing that. That goes a long way just for the presentation itself.
Or just
I'll say,
get plasma and keep wiggling your mouse pointer over and over and over again.
Well, that gets annoying because Mac OS does it too. Like that piece of like, here it's big and now it goes away. Here it's big, goes away. Like keeping those things consistently, keep the text consistently large and the contrast consistently high. That stuff helps a lot more than trying to like, because someone looks down, you wiggled your mouse and they're like, oh, what happened? Like I lost it. Like that stuff happens all the time. That it's kind of good just to make it easy for someone to follow along, even if they blinked, right? Like that is really hard to do in presentations and live demos.
And I'll just say, do way more run-throughs than you think you need to, and get as much feedback from friends or other, you know, like friendly listeners as you can beforehand, and you'll get better iteratively.
And don't even feel like you have, because it's hard sometimes, like, hey, get my coworker to come sit with me for an hour that I'm going to like run through this presentation. Like, you don't have to do the whole thing. Like, you can do, here's a demo. It's 10 minutes. Can I show this demo to you and see if this makes sense? And then you could say, have someone else do here's the 15 minutes of slides. Can I show this to you? And then you're not taking a bunch of people's time for an hour. You can take bits and pieces of like, hey, this is 10, 15 minutes. I just want feedback on this part of it so that I'm unclear if it's coming across the message that I want you to learn. So I would say those are some good first time tips just in general. But I do think that we could probably wrap up the live stream. Thank you everyone for coming, for asking questions. We hope that's if you have email or if you have questions about the CFP that like weren't addressed here, feel free to email cfp@socallinuxexpo.org. If you're watching this as a recording and it's before November 1st, feel free to send it. If it's after November 1st and the CFP is closed, still, come. Like, it's still, we want you to be there. We want you to experience just what the conference is like. I know there's still discounts for if you're in education, if you're a student or at a university or something, like you get discounts for that. But in general, it's not a large vendor single purpose sort of event. It is a community run, community powered sort of event that we want people to be involved in, as well as contribute to, like, on your own in the hallway. Seeing people have great conversations in the hallway is great as someone that's helping run the event. Like, I just like seeing people have a good time, and like you see a big circle of like 10 people and they're all laughing and learning together. Like, that's cool that you just know, like, you facilitate some of that, even if it's not in a room that was scheduled and a presenter. So.
Yep. So yeah, we're looking forward to see all your proposals. If there's something that, again, if there's something you want to see that you think somebody we should invite, send a note to CFP at SoCal Linux Expo. If you work for a company that you think would enjoy reaching the SCaLE audience and wants to sponsor, drop us a note as well. There's links on the website. And then otherwise, we hope to see you in the hallway track at SCaLE.
Thank you, everyone.
I actually have no idea how to end this as a live stream because I don't see any controls in here. Wait, manage streaming. Can I stop it? Oh, I can stop it there. There was a sub menu. Cool. So, all right. Thanks, everyone.
Just cut off OBS and let it die.
There we go. I think it's stopped. I think we're good. It gave me